Good morning, students. Myself, Dr. Vijender Singh Tawar, Associate Professor in English. Presently, I have been posted at Government College, Gudha. In the series of video lectures which I am preparing, this video is meant for Class BA Part 2nd, Subject English Literature, Paper 1st, and the topic of the talk is critical appreciation of the famous poem of P.B. Shelley, Ode to the West Wind. Now the first thing about the poet, P.B. Shelley, that is Percy Bysshe Shelley, was born in 1792 and died in 1822. That is, he lived just for 30 years. And he is regarded as one of the major English Romantic poets, one of the 5 top most romantic poets of English language. He is critically regarded among the finest lyric poets in English language. He was famous for his friendship with John Keats and Lord Byron. One thing about him, one should know that he was born in an aristocratic family. He was sent in the university for study. There used to be a law that every student should go to church, and it was the nature or attitude of P.B. Shelley that he never accepted anything which was forced or imposed on him. So he, with his friends, wrote a pamphlet. The name of the pamphlet was, or the title of the pamphlet was, Necessity of Atheism. He was caught and he was restricted from the university. He led unconventional life. His uncompromising idealism, his disapproving voice made him an authoritative and much denigrated figure during his life and afterwards. That is, he led something different or unusual life, abnormal ideology. The result was he was not respected during his lifetime, and there was a section of society which criticized him even after his death. But he became an idol for the next 2 or 3 or even 4 generations of poets, including the important Victorian and pre-Raphaelite poets such as Robert Browning, Alfred Lord Tennyson, as well as Lord Byron, and poets in other languages. Now about the poem. The poem entitled Ode to the West Wind was written in 1819 and it was published in 1820 along with Shelley's musical drama Prometheus Unbound. It is regarded as one of the greatest poems ever composed in English language. It has also been called a matchless ode, but it is not easy to understand this poem. The main difficulty in understanding it arises from the abundance of similes and metaphors which follow one after the other with an astonishing quickness. As I have told you, this poem is one of the greatest achievements, creditable achievements of P.B. Shelley. It has a deep human and political interest. That is, it gives a political as well as human message. It embodies his revolutionary and reformist zeal, his lofty idealism, and invincible optimism despite the crushing circumstances of his life. Now, the poem is a big poem of 70 lines. It has been divided into 5 stanzas of 14 lines each. We will discuss about it when we will examine it critically. First of all, let us now concentrate on how the poet has developed the idea into this poem. As I have told you, the poem is divided into 5 stanzas. In the first stanza, the poet describes the impact of the west wind on the earth. In the second, in the sky. In the third, on the ocean. And in the fourth stanza, the poet tries to establish a link between himself and the west wind. And in the fifth, he gives a message, a universal message. Now, let us move to the first stanza. The opening stanza describes the activities of the west wind on land. The west wind drives the dead leaves before it, just as a wizard drives away a ghost by his approach. The west wind scatters the seeds far and wide and covers them, put them into holes and cover them with dust. And there they remain for some time, particularly till the spring season comes or throughout the winter season, just as dead bodies remain in the graves. But there is a difference. Dead bodies never come out, but these seeds will come out in the form of plants. When the spring season comes, they sprout into plants which bear flowers, filling the valley with sweet smells and attractive colors. The west wind moves with a terrific force and makes massacre of all that stand in its way. But it takes care to preserve the seeds under the soil so as to ensure a resurrection in the world of nature with the advent of the spring season. In this way, the west wind becomes both a destroyer and preserver. In short, we can say west wind destroys the old and preserves the new. This is a symbolic of the activities of the west wind on the land. Now, in the second stanza, as I told you, describe the impact of west wind in the sky. The west wind describes the activities of the west wind in the air or in the sky. The west wind carries on its surface loose clouds which seem to have fallen from the sky, just as withered leaves fall from the branches of trees in autumn season on the land. The clouds floating on the surface of the west wind are messengers of rain and lightning. The logs of approaching storm are spread on the airy surface of the west wind like the bright hair uplifted from the head of a fringed bacchante. In the European seasonal cycle, autumn is the season which stands just before winter, at the end of which a year closes. The idea is, in this season, in the autumn season, we can say, there are seen clouds everywhere in the sky. From the horizon to the topmost point of the sky, there are only clouds, and they are spread in not in a systematic but unsystematic way. They have been compared with the uplifted hair of a female worshipper of Bacchus, that is god of wine. So before the coming of winter, west wind passes over earth, destroying the old degenerate things and making horrible sounds. The howling of the west wind is therefore imagined by the poet to be the dirge, that is funeral song or the funeral song for the closing year. Funeral song is a song which is sung at the death of somebody. Here, the person who is dead is not a human being but the ear. Shelley here addresses the clouds accumulated from the surface of the ocean up to the great heights of the sky as angels of rain and lightning. Angel here, messengers. They indicate that there will come rain and lightning, because they obviously indicate that the rain and lightning are approaching soon. By the expression the dome of a vast sepulchre, Shelley here refers to the closing night, which will serve as the dome of a vast tomb in which the closing year will be buried. That is, the year which is imagined is dead and it will be buried, just as we bury a dead human being. The accumulated water vapors also make the roof over the dying year, and the atmosphere seems to be solid because of thick layers of dense clouds. The point is that wind operates with the same and the single point agenda. It destroys the dead and preserves the living. The poet calls upon the west wind to listen to him. As I told you, this poem was composed when the poet was suffering from all kinds of misfortune in his personal life. He was not given respect in the society. Even his family members did not accept him. Even his children were not allowed to see him. Now let us come to the third stanza. In the third stanza, the realm of the ruling west wind is the sea, both the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, or the ocean, and both the surface and the vegetation beneath. Shelley here has personified the Mediterranean, which perhaps in its sleep is dreaming of destruction of the palaces. It shows that Shelley was a minute observer of nature. He had a keen eye to observe the activities of the nature. During summer season, Mediterranean ocean remains calm, so the poet imagined as if it was sleeping. During summer, the Mediterranean and the Roman palaces and the towers which remain submerged are all quite as if they seem to be sleeping, because no storms appear to ruffle the surface of the sea in that season. But the wind agitates the sea, and the palaces seems to quiver, they tremble on account of the tremendous motion of the waves. This may be easily taken for the allusions to Shelley's hope for political change in Italy, for the collapse of the kings and kingdoms. Shelley here must have tried to bring home a political philosophy. The old palaces and towers symbolizes corrupt, degenerate, and old power, old order and institutions. All these should be destroyed, and the poet dreams along with the sea in order to make way for a new beginning. The reader is taken not only to the Atlantic, where its smooth surface has turned into deep waves, but under it, where woods, foliage, and foliage are forced to dispossess themselves of foliage upon hearing the wind's voice. That is, the west wind moves and chasms that waves runs this way, that way, between them a chasm falls as if they are preparing a path for the west wind, and the vegetation which grow at the bottom of the ocean, Atlantic Ocean, they listen to the sound and fall, or may are forced to, or the vegetation forced is forced to fall its leaves. In the fourth stanza, the poet establishes a link between his own personality and the personality of the west wind. He recalls his boyhood when he was as swift, energetic, and uncontrollable as the west wind. In his boyhood, he could excel the speed of the west wind and could accompany it on its wanderings over the sky. But now the misfortune of life have crushed him. He is bleeding on the thorns of life helplessly. The idea is he has been surrounded by so many sorrows that he does not have now that kind of energy which he had in his boyhood. He wishes that he were a leaf, a wave, a cloud, so that the west wind could lift him. He makes a pathetic appeal to the west wind to come to his help and listen to what he wants to say. The final stanza includes the whole universe in its sweep. The poet appeals to the west wind to treat him as a lyre, a musical instrument, and to blow on him as it blows on the forest. Like the forest, he too is passing through the autumn of his life. The west wind blowing on him and on the forest will produce a sad but sweet music. Addressing to the west wind as spirit fierce and impetuous one, he appeals to it to become one with him and to scatter his dead thoughts over the universe in order that these thoughts may bring about a new period in human history. The idea is he wants to give a message to the universe, to the whole mankind. So far, his ideas could not change the attitude, ideology of the people. They are just like dead leaves. But the poet is quite hopeful that his dead thoughts, which are now dead, ineffective in the different sense, they may become effective after some time or somewhere. The poet is optimist. He would like the west wind to broadcast over the whole world his prophecy about the coming of the golden age. The prophecy is, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? Idea is he wants to give to the humanity a message that if nowadays there is a darkness, there will come light very soon. If we are surrounded by sorrows, there will come happiness. We should be optimist. Now let us analyze the poem critically. The first thing about, or the first topic is form of the poem. The poem is an ode in the Italian verse form called terza rima. Ode means it is addressed to the west wind. So it is an ode and it is terza rima. Terza rima means it is divided into 5 stanzas. Each stanza is planned like a sonnet containing 14 lines, that is 4 triplets and a couplet. The lines are in a group of 3 and a middle rhyme of one set of 3 becomes the outside rhyme of the next set and the end with a couplet repeating the rhyme of the middle line of the final triplet. Thus, the rhyme scheme of each part is ABA, BC, CD, C, DED, and EEE. The lines are composed in iambic pentameter. Now, the second point about this poem is there is a personal element. The poet gives expression to his feelings and hopes. Formerly, he too was free like the west wind, now he is sad. So he appeals to the west wind to come to his help and to lift him like a wave, a leaf, and a cloud. Oh, lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. A heavy weight of hours had chained and bound one to like the tameless, swift, and proud. The third point is music and melody. It is one of the finest poems of Shelley, being a masterpiece of lyricism. It is nearer to music than any other poem in the English language. Shelley's musical gifts find the fullest expression here. The poet appears as a master of harmonies, melody, rhythm, and sweetness of words combined to produce a matchless lyric. The whole poem possesses this musical quality, but the following lines may be taken as example of the subtle methods by which melodic effects have been produced in the poem. Lulled the coil of his crystalline streams. It is something about Mediterranean Ocean. Now the fourth is the imagery. The poet gives us an abundance of pictures of the landscape, skyscape, and the seascape in the first three stanzas of this poem. The imagery in the second stanza is certainly abstract and ethereal. That is, they are hazy, they are confusing. But the imagery in the first and the third stanza is perfect concrete. For example, from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven like ghost from an enchanter's plea. The myth-making quality. Shelley personifies the west wind and gives it an independent life. He also personifies the Atlantic and the Mediterranean seas, giving each a separate existence. These forces of nature are so vitally imagined that they become real presences, inspiring wonder and awe. This giving of the individual life to the different forces of nature is known as Shelley's mythopoeic quality, or the quality of myth, making myths. Shelley is unique in English poetry by virtue of this power. For him, the forces of nature have the same reality as human beings. In this poem, he renders natural phenomena in terms of conscious life. That is, he observes the nature minutely and presents before us in such a way that we believe what he says. Now, Shelley's revolutionary fervor and his idealism. As I have told you, this poem contains a message, and that is very important. As we know, Shelley was a revolutionary. He was most keenly dissatisfied with the existing order of things, it is existing society, rules, etc. He hated political tyranny and orthodox Christianity. He hated the wickedness, the evil, and the wars which made the life of mankind so unhappy and miserable. He wanted to liberate mankind from the chains of the political, religious, and intellectual slavery. This attitude of his mind is clearly reflected in this poem. The west wind is depicted as a destroyer of the dead leaves and a preserver of the living seeds. Symbolically interpreted, the west wind is a destroyer of the old order of society and a preserver of the new. In other words, the west wind is a symbol of those forces which sweep away old modes of life, old institutions, and old customs, and which herald, that is, welcome new ways of thought and new patterns of life. In the last stanza, the west wind symbolizes the forces that will bring about the golden age of mankind, when the human nature would become perfect and beauty and love would rule the universe. Shelley dreamed of a millennium and believed in the perfectibility of human nature. Of this belief, the west wind is the proclaimer. Shelley's idealism is evident from his belief. Shelley was an idealist, a dreamer, a visionary, and we clearly see him in this light, in this poem, in which he utters a prophecy about the radiant future of mankind. He expresses the hope that his dead thoughts will quicken a new birth and thus bring about a revolutionary change in the social, political, and religious setup of human society. The poem has thus a prophetic quality. In other words, the poet speaks of his character of a prophet, saying, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? Shelley was a pessimist as regarded the present of mankind, but he was a radiant optimist about the future. The idea is he was not happy with the present. He finds that the present system of society, of the world, human beings, was not just, and he hoped that a time will come when a just system will come. That is why he says, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? That is, if there are problems, If there are sorrows, there are unhappiness, very soon there will come happiness. Now, the conclusion. In conclusion, it may be said that the poem is perfect from the point of view of its construction. There is a logical development of ideas in it. The poem has a unity of structure and rare symmetry. In the first three stanzas, we are given the effects of the west wind on the leaves, the seeds, the clouds, and the waves. In the fourth stanza, the poet becomes personal and establishes a link between himself and the west wind. In the final stanza, the poet passes from personal to the universal and calls upon the west wind to proclaim his prophecy about the golden age of mankind. And the poet has achieved his purpose in a masterly manner. The idea is whatever the poet has presented, he has presented in a skilled and impressive manner. Thank you very much.